thought this morning. Something had already begun. Light reached the room. Air moved through your lungs. The weight of your body met the bed. A sound arrived from somewhere beyond the walls. For one brief interval, the world was present before the narrator inside you announced a name, a schedule, a worry, or a life. Then the sentence returned. I am awake. I am late. I am tired. I am me. But who was there 1 moment earlier? This is the final question of Cogito Current. We began with Descartes and the most famous sentence in modern philosophy, I think, therefore I am. We followed thought as it streamed, doubted, calculated, argued, watched itself, built machines, reached toward infinity, became still, and seemed to disappear. Now we have reached the edge of the sentence itself. What are you before the words I am appear? Descartes did not begin with peace. He began with demolition. He doubted the senses because senses can mislead. He doubted memory because memory can fail. He doubted the waking world because dreams can feel convincing from inside them. He imagined deception so complete that even simple reasoning might be manipulated. But the act of doubt contained one thing doubt could not erase. If deception was happening, there had to be thinking in which deception appeared. If he was wrong about everything, the error was still occurring. In the immediate act of thinking, existence could not honestly be denied. That is the force of the cogito. It is not a motivational slogan. It is a present tense event. While thinking is occurring, the occurrence cannot be nothing. But notice how quickly we usually add more than the argument gives us. We turn a moment of certainty into a portrait of a permanent owner. We imagine a sealed observer behind the eyes, unchanged from childhood to old age, possessing every thought as property. We move from there is thinking now to there is one simple thing called me, and it remains exactly itself through every change. The cogito does not prove all of that. It secures a point. It does not complete the map. Even Descartes had more work to do after finding his first certainty. The body, the external world, the reliability of reason, and the nature of the thinker were not automatically delivered by the word therefore. The sentence opened a foundation. It did not furnish the entire house. So perhaps the finale begins by making the sentence smaller, not weaker. I think, therefore I cannot deny that existence is happening here, now, in this act. That is still extraordinary. But it leaves our question alive. Is explicit thought the source of being, or one way being becomes visible to itself? Long before you learned the word I, experience already had a point of view. Hunger did not arrive as an abstract proposition. Cold was not first presented as a theory. A face came near. A voice became familiar. The organism oriented toward comfort and away from danger before it could compose an autobiography. Phenomenologists use an awkward phrase for something intimate, pre-reflective self-awareness. It does not mean staring inward. It means that experience is already given from somewhere. Pain hurts here. Color appears from this angle. A sound interrupts this field of attention. You do not normally need a second thought saying, I am the one hearing, before hearing has a first-person character. Reflection comes later. Reflection turns experience into an object. It says, I notice that I am anxious. I remember that I was happy. I wonder what kind of person I have become. Pre-reflective awareness is more basic. It is not a little witness sitting behind experience. It is the lived first-person shape of experience itself. This is a philosophical account, not a scan of the soul. It does not prove that consciousness floats free of the body. It does not show that awareness survives death. But it does challenge one common assumption, that you become present only when the inner voice names you. Your body has been making that challenge throughout this series. Before a reason becomes verbal, the heart changes pace. Muscles prepare. The stomach tightens. Attention turns. The nervous system predicts, regulates, and selects. Sometimes you explain an action after processes beneath conscious narration have already set it in motion. That does not make you unreal. It makes you layered. One layer is narrative. It links yesterday to tomorrow. It remembers promises, edits failures, imagines futures, and tells you what kind of person you are. This layer is powerful. Without it, responsibility, planning, and long relationships would be difficult to sustain.
Another layer is embodied. It tracks balance, temperature, effort, pain, hunger, heartbeat, and the boundary between organism and world. It does not usually speak in paragraphs. It communicates through urgency, ease, attraction, fatigue, and readiness. Another layer is social. Your sense of self has been shaped by names other people gave you, roles they expected, love they offered, injuries they left, and worlds you learned to enter with caution or trust. Another layer is attentional. What is selected becomes vivid. What is ignored fades. A change in attention can alter the felt size of a thought without changing the facts around it. Neuroscience does not reveal one glowing center where the true self lives. Research instead associates self-related processing with interacting systems involved in memory, bodily regulation, salience, attention, control, and social understanding. The narrative self and the embodied self are not two people fighting for one skull. They are useful descriptions of different patterns within one living process. The phrase "one living process" matters. A river is not imaginary because no single drop remains from source to sea. A melody is not fake because it exists only through notes changing in time. A flame is not less real because its stability depends on a continuous exchange. Perhaps a self can be real in the same way, not as an unchanging object, but as an organized continuity.
That is a philosophical interpretation. Science can identify changing components, dependencies, and correlations. It cannot, by measurement alone, decide what kind of reality a person ultimately has. But the process view explains something the permanent object view struggles to hold. You can change deeply and still be accountable, lose a belief and still recognize a life, enter silence without becoming nobody. Think back across cogito current. The stream of consciousness showed that thought rarely arrives as neat propositions. It drifts, interrupts, repeats, associates, and changes direction. The mind-body problem showed that experience is not merely commentary pasted onto flesh. Thoughts without a thinker challenge the feeling that every mental event must be deliberately authored. The mechanical mind asked whether fluent output is the same as meaning. Rational doubt asked, what certainty can survive synthetic evidence? Logic met infinity and discovered that rules can carry us toward realities imagination cannot contain. The flow of thought revealed that attention can change our relation to mental movement. Then the cogito was interrupted, and the absence of report turned out not to be a simple proof of absence. Every episode loosened one knot in the same assumption, that the voice in your head is the whole of you. It is not the whole, but it is not an enemy either. The narrator can distort. It can rehearse shame until shame sounds like identity. It can mistake fear for prophecy. It can build a courtroom in which every memory becomes evidence against you. Yet the narrator also keeps faith with people who are not present. It remembers why a promise matters. It lets the person you were speak to the person you may become. Freedom does not require murdering the narrator. It requires ending its monopoly. When a thought says, "I am broken," another layer can answer without words. The body is still breathing. Attention can move. A relationship can offer a different mirror. A remembered value can guide the next action. The thought is real as an event. but it is not automatically a final description. This is where the question, who am I, changes. At first it sounds as if we are searching for a hidden noun, a soul, a brain, a witness, a story, a pattern, one final object that can stand behind every experience and say, that is the answer. But what if the demand for one final object is the mistake? Maybe who you are is not found by subtracting every layer until one pure substance remains. Maybe you are the coordinated life of the layers, embodied, remembered, relational, attentive, vulnerable, and capable of revision. There are experiences people describe as pure awareness, clear presence with little ordinary thought content, less sense of time, fewer boundaries, and no familiar autobiography in the foreground. Researchers have begun creating careful questionnaires to describe these reports rather than forcing all of them into one mystical category. The reports matter. They show that human experience can be organized in ways everyday language does not capture well. They may help separate awareness from the usual density of self-narration, but they do not prove what people often want them to prove.
A retrospective report is still a report made afterward. Similar words can refer to different experiences. A measured pattern does not establish consciousness independent of a brain, and an experience that feels timeless does not demonstrate literal eternity. The honest conclusion is narrower and more useful. The ordinary narrative self can become quiet without every dimension of experience necessarily becoming quiet with it. That conclusion does not end the mystery. It disciplines it. 3 possibilities remain open. First, the minimal sense of being a subject may be an embodied achievement. A living system, continuously regulating itself, distinguishing self from world, and integrating sensation into action. On this view, awareness before the sentence is still biological, still dependent, still remarkable. Second, the self may be a pattern with no single owner at its center. Thoughts, memories, bodily signals, and relationships participate in a changing organization that can refer to itself. On this view, there is no tiny thinker behind thought, but there is a real person in the organized continuity. Third, consciousness may include aspects our current methods do not explain. The existence of subjective experience remains a profound scientific and philosophical problem, but an unexplained problem is not a blank check. It does not authorize us to declare that consciousness is cosmic, immortal, or independent of matter, simply because those ideas feel expansive. Wonder becomes stronger when it does not need counterfeit certainty. So what can you actually do with this finale? Not force your mind to become empty. Not treat every thought as contamination. Not use the language of awareness to escape responsibility, grief, history, or the needs of the body. Instead,
a sensation appears, then a word, then an interpretation, then a story about the kind of person who would have that interpretation. Often these arrive so quickly they feel like one solid fact. Slow the sequence just enough to see its layers. There is pressure in the chest. There is the sentence, something is wrong. There is the prediction, I will not survive this. There is the identity claim, I am weak. Those are not identical statements. Seeing the difference does not erase pain. It creates room for a more accurate response. The same is true of praise. There is warmth, there is relief. There is the sentence, they approve of me. Then comes the identity claim, I am worthy only while this continues. Awareness before the story is not automatically wise. The body can misread, attention can narrow, memory can bias what becomes available. But when no single layer is crowned as the absolute ruler, correction becomes possible. The body can correct the story, evidence can correct memory, another person can correct isolation, reflection can correct impulse. Silence can correct the illusion that every mental event requires an answer. This is not transcendence as escape. It is transcendence as perspective, the ability of a living system to hold one of its own patterns without being completely captured by it. And perhaps that is why the cogito still matters after we move beyond it. Descartes found a sentence that could survive doubt. We are not discarding it. We are placing it inside a larger event.
Thinking occurs because a living history, a body, a language, a world, and a field of experience are already underway. The sentence I am does not summon you from nothing. It gathers what is happening into a form that can be remembered, questioned, and shared. Here is the finale's philosophical proposal, clearly labeled as interpretation rather than proof. Being does not begin with the sentence I think. The sentence is one of the ways being becomes articulate. That proposal may be wrong. A strict Cartesian can resist it. A materialist can translate it into biological organization. A contemplative tradition can read it as a doorway to awareness without narrative. Each interpretation adds commitments that the bare evidence does not settle. What the evidence does settle is more modest. The self cannot be responsibly reduced to one current thought. The inner voice is neither a complete owner nor a useless illusion. Embodied in narrative processes can shift relative to one another. First-person reports deserve study without being turned into supernatural proof. And the fact that identity is constructed from changing processes does not make dignity, suffering, love, or responsibility unreal. A contract is constructed, so is a language, so is a home. Construction is not the opposite of reality. It is one of the ways reality becomes inhabitable. Your identity is not a prison because it has a history. It is not infinitely flexible because it is a process. Bodies have limits. Actions have consequences. Other people are not characters generated by your awareness. A mature account of self must preserve both freedom and friction. You are revisable, not imaginary. You are embodied, not merely trapped in a body.
You are narrated, but not exhausted by the narration. You are relational, but not reducible to other people's judgments. You are present before you can explain your presence. Tomorrow morning, the sequence will begin again. Light, breath, weight, sound, then the name, the schedule, the unfinished problem, the remembered face, the sentence I am. Listen for the small interval before the sentence closes around the day. Do not turn it into another achievement. Do not ask whether you performed awareness correctly. Simply notice that the narrator arrives within a life already in motion. The cogito gave philosophy an indestructible point. Thought cannot honestly deny the existence occurring in the act of thought. The journey beyond cogito gives us no equally perfect slogan. It gives us something harder, a self that is embodied, layered, changing, and unfinished, a consciousness that can investigate itself but cannot step completely outside itself. A mystery deep enough to survive precision. Maybe the final answer is not, I think, therefore I am. Maybe it is this. Thinking appears, being is already underway, and when the story of you grows quiet, what remains?